Hey everyone, welcome to another Throwback Thursday. My name is Zach. I'm a historical interpreter with Three Rivers Park District. Now, yesterday I put up a video on the Landings Facebook that was all about exploring history in your neighborhood, looking for signs, plaques, historic sites, all of that. Like, how do we uncover those clues to the past that are within our own neighborhood? Because really, every single place has a story, and we just have to maybe figure out how do we find that story, right? And one of the things that came up was, every street has a story, and even every street name, there's some kind of story behind how that street got its name. So I challenge you today to think about, what street do you live on? And then how did it get its name? And maybe it's a number. So you can look at, how the numbering system works, but think about a named street near you and how did that street get its name? And I want to take you with me on a walk through my neighborhood. The streets of Minneapolis are the area we're going to walk through are named, they're alphabetical. So A through Z. So we're going to start with A for Aldrich and walk through a couple of these streets and talk about how they got their name, okay? All right, first up is A is for Aldrich. There's kind of two stories for how Aldrich Avenue got its name. One is for Thomas Aldrich. He was a writer and he was an editor for the Atlantic Monthly magazine in the late 1800s. So that's one story. Another story is that it's for Cyrus Aldrich. He moved to Minneapolis in 1855 and he was a real estate mogul. He was a politician and he also served as the postmaster for the city of Minneapolis. So Aldrich Avenue is named after either Cyrus or Thomas Aldrich. We're not exactly sure. It could be both. All right, next up is the letter B for Bryant Avenue. Full disclosure, I'm kind of a fan of Bryant Avenue and the story behind it got its name. You can see I even have a t-shirt with this intersection on it. We're going to come back to this one later, okay? This is kind of an important one. I want to come back to this one. We're going to head down to C. The letter C is for Colfax Avenue. It's named after Schuyler Colfax. He was vice president of the United States under Ulysses S. Grant when he was president after the Civil War. So C is for Colfax, named after Schuyler Colfax. So I realize now that I actually skipped DuPont Avenue, the D street, because I was distracted by this fox that I saw running down the street. I wanted to try and get a good picture or video of this fox. But D is for DuPont. It's named after Francis DuPont. He was an admiral in the Navy during the Mexican and Civil War. But I'm glad we got to see this fox. That's kind of a cool thing too. That was pretty cool that we saw that fox. I just stopped to talk to some people that they had seen the fox was just in their backyard. Anyways, next up, E is for Emerson, which is named after Ralph Waldo Emerson, the famous poet and transcendentalist. Really great author. You should check out some of his stuff. F is for Fremont, which is named after John C. Fremont. He was an officer in the Union Army in the Civil War, and afterwards he worked as a sort of an explorer and a surveyor of the West. His nickname was the Pathfinder because he was really good at navigating through the West, and there's actually a whole lot of like plants and animals that are named after John C. Fremont. So he was a really great explorer and surveyor in the West. G is for Girard. It's named after Stephen Girard. He made a bunch of money as a merchant in the 19th century and then later became a philanthropist, and he founded Girard College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. H is for Humboldt. It's named after Friedrich Alexander Humboldt. He was a German scientist and a naturalist who traveled a lot through the Americas, like Central and Southern America, so Mexico, Cuba, Venezuela. And in fact, Friedrich Humboldt is credited as being probably the first scientist to write about human-caused climate change in the year 1800. That's how long we've known humans have been causing climate change, because Friedrich Humboldt wrote about it in 1800 when he saw the deforestation happening in Venezuela, and he wrote about it for a couple other times later in his life too, but pretty incredible, right? I is for Irving Avenue. It's named after Washington Irving, an 18th and 19th century writer. He wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is the story of Ichabod Crane. And he also wrote a great story called Rip Van Winkle. If you haven't read it yet, it's about this guy. He lives in, he's a British colonist living in America. So he's loyal to King George, and he goes to sleep and he wakes up 20 years later after the American Revolution has happened. So he wakes up not even knowing that the American Revolution happened and knowing that he was on the wrong side, has to kind of like learn his village again and stuff. It's a great story. But I is for Irving Avenue, named after Washington Irving. And if you haven't read Rip Van Winkle, you should definitely go check that out. Okay, so this street also breaks up the alphabet thing, and it's a pretty easy one. So Lake of the Isles Parkway is named after Lake of the Isles, which is my true destination today. Actually, I came to do a little birding and see what kind of waterfowl we could see. But I want to go sit by the lake for a little bit, see what kind of birds I can find, and we're going to talk a little bit more about B for Bryant, which is for William Cullen Bryant, a really great poet. Let's go head down to the lake. So I'm down here at Lake of the Isles, which is my true destination for the night. I'm glad we got to kind of walk through some Minneapolis street names from A to maybe I, until we got to the lake and it stopped for me. But I came down here to do a little birding. So I saw there's red-winged blackbirds all over out here. I saw a drake mallard just swim by. There's actually some bats out. It's late enough. I just saw it looked like a big brown bat flying around. I'm gonna do a little bit more birding here. But this is a really great spot to see some of the migratory waterfowl that are coming through. All kinds of birds are migrating through right now, but especially a lot of waterfowl. So all different kinds of duck species. I've seen some trumpeter swans coming through, and so they're coming from their wintering grounds, and they're migrating through up to Minnesota, Canada, maybe out to the East Coast for some of them, out towards the Hudson Bay. And it's pretty cool, especially like, so trumpeter swans have this really great ability. They nest essentially, if they can, in the same spot every single year. So it's some kind of like invisible force that brings them back there, that they know exactly where to go. They're really great navigators. And somebody else who really saw the kind of the cool power in that was a man named William Cullen Bryant. When we stopped for B is for Bryant Avenue, that's named after William Cullen Bryant. He was a romantic poet from the 18th to 19th century, and so he really got big in the 19th century. And one of his biggest poems is called To a Waterfowl from 1818, and I want to read that here. So the story is he's looking out over a lake and he saw a duck flying through, and kind of imagined that same invisible force that guides that duck to where it needs to go, and that kind of sparked something in him to write this poem called To a Waterfowl. So here it is. He says, "Whither, midst falling dew, while glow the heavens with the last steps of day, far through their rosy depths dost thou pursue thy solitary way? Vainly the fowler's eye might mark thy distant flight to do thee wrong, as darkly seen against the crimson sky thy figure floats along. Seek'st thou the plashy brink of weedy lake, or marge of river wide, or where the rocking billows rise and sink on the chafed ocean side? There is a power whose care teaches thy way along that pathless coast, the desert and illimitable air, lone, wandering, but not lost. All day thy wings have fanned, at that far height the cold thin atmosphere, yet stoop not weary to the welcome land, though the dark night is near. And soon that toil shall end. Soon shalt thou find a summer home and rest, and scream among thy fellows, reeds shall bend soon o'er thy sheltered nest. Thou art gone, the abyss of heaven hath swallowed up thy form, yet on my heart deeply hath sunk the lesson thou hast given, and soon shall not depart. He who from zone to zone guides through the boundless sky thy certain flight, in the long way that I must trace alone, will lead my steps aright." And so he's looking at, you know, this path of this waterfowl, this duck or this swan flying across the lake. What guides that duck to where it's going? And thinking to himself, well, what guides me where I'm going? And am I going to be guided right? And he ends it thinking, yeah, I will. So that's, you know, A to Z, or really A to I as far as we got. I'm going to spend a little bit more time down here at Lake of the Isles doing some birding, and I hope you guys get out to do a little birding yourself. And if you get outside and do a little walking around your neighborhood, I want you to be on the lookout for some of those clues to the past, whether it's signs, plaques, historic sites, or even just the name of the street where you live. Try and figure out, what is the story behind that place? And if you figure it out, or if you already know, please share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear stories about history in your neighborhood as you guys are connecting to history at home. Again, my name is Zach, historical interpreter with Three Rivers, and I want to thank you guys so much again for joining us to learn and to connect to history at home for another Throwback Thursday. We'll see you next time. Bye.